Good morning, everybody. And I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. Welcomed so warmly by all of you. This feels in many ways like a true spiritual home, in a lot of ways. And so I thank you for the warm welcome you've given myself, my children, and my parents for the first time here. And with that, I'll begin. My name is Kent Rogers. I'm a pastor at the Lord's New Church, and our current slideshow will be called The Inner Sense of You. And this is a topic that's been sort of coming to me over the last few years, and it's really become very important to me and moving towards the center of my theology. So I'm happy and grateful to be able to share it with you. But before that, I will, next slide please, show you what this is what you were really hoping to see when we showed up. And I'm sorry she's not here, but there's an obvious reason why she's not. And I have to say my heart is also a little bit torn, but I know I'll have many years ahead to be with my new grandson. And this is our daughter, Elisa, who's in a state of bliss. I called her after we found out the baby was born. Yeah, I'm fine, Dad. I'm doing great. Never heard her so just at peace and happy. So she's going to be a great mom, just like her mom. Here's a little outline. We'll look at the 3 levels of meaning in the Word, which Swedenborg teaches us about. The Word as the structure of heaven. It's also a teaching. I'll be drawing teachings which are right there and sort of assembling them into a result that I find exciting. Our every state is cradled by the Word. This is moving a little bit farther out from just obvious statements. And then the inner meaning of you, and then sort of extrapolations from the punchline there, which is how to use this in our life, and that's the helicopter. I almost was going to say helicopter rescue piloting for dummies, but I know that nobody's here is a dummy. So, and then the inner meaning of us, and the path of the healer, which is really where my mind and heart rests more and more of how do we become healers, because this world needs healers. Okay, so next slide, please. So when you hear that the Word has a inner sense, let's say you can imagine you heard that for the first time, it is very exciting, isn't it? It excites that part of our mind which loves adventure, the Indiana Jones part of our mind. What's in this? Let's find the secret code to unpack it and get the gold. So it's like we're given a silver key and there's gold inside a chest. How do we get it to work? It's also very moving on an emotional level. It gives us hope. I've read the Bible. I've gotten a lot from it, but there's something deeper, it's more personal about me and about the Lord's inner life. It's also for our higher intellect, not just the adventure-seeking, I want to understand intellect. It's a promise of a spiritual path that will teach me how to evolve. And even going higher than that, we hope that it can amplify our love for others and our love for God. And moving on to the 3 levels of meaning in the Word, we can just move right on to the next slide. I'm reading a quote here that you can also read. Because the Lord has a heavenly, spiritual, and natural element, so also the Word contains 3 levels of meaning, a heavenly one, a spiritual one, and a natural one. And we know that the Word is the Lord. It says that right in the Gospel of John. You don't even need Swedenborg to learn that. But the 3 levels of God that are also in the Word, that's something that we get from Swedenborg. So the literal or outer meaning of the word exists only on our level, meaning the natural level of our mind. And there is an inner meaning of the word, also an inmost. Spiritual angels perceive the inner meaning, and heavenly angels or celestial angels the highest level. Moving on. So the highest level is all about the Lord. It's about his love, his providence, kingdom in heaven and on earth, and especially the glorification of his humans. So if we read the word on the level that's the highest, we're learning about the Lord himself. And we could say love and wisdom itself and their evolution. And also about Jesus Christ's inner life. The next level is about us, about our spiritual progress. All the details in the word, down to the individual words, contain a spiritual sense, which provides a full description of everything to do with the church as regards its spiritual state from beginning to end, which is exactly what Jim was telling us about. And the church, of course, can mean an organization, can mean a building, but it also means our own mind. And then moving on, the whole word is the doctrine of love and charity. So that's what the word is for, is to teach us about how to love, how to be good to one another. And it is the structure of heaven. I'm going to read from True Christian Religion. It says, when I read the word, this is Swedenborg talking, from the first chapter, when I read the word, from the first chapter in Isaiah to the last chapter in Malachi, in other words, all the prophets, and the Psalms of David, and kept my thoughts fixed on their spiritual meaning, I was given a clear perception that every verse communicates with some community in heaven, and therefore the whole word communicates with the entirety of heaven. This made it clear to me that as the Lord is the Word, heaven is also the Word, since heaven is heaven from the Lord, and by means of the Word, the Lord is everything to all of heaven. So, the Word somehow is a code or a description of heaven itself, and every single word is connected to something in all of the heavens. And this is a Chagall painting, and I put it in this morning. This is because I wanted a picture of the heavenly bride, right? So the holy city, New Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven and is basically heaven coming onto the earth. And that's really the goal of the word, is to bring what is heavenly down into our lives. Next slide, please. And now we're getting more towards the heart of what I'm trying to communicate here. The word is cradling our every state. So if the natural life is an outbirth of spirit, then what we can know is that the natural level of the word is a mirror of our natural levels. And if you read through the word, you can see absolutely every state that humans go through. Every last despicable deed that we can imagine is there. Every most wonderful, exalted state of love is there. Every last state that we can have is there. And there's this beautiful psalm. In your book, they are all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. Psalm 139, one of the most beautiful psalms, maybe my favorite. It's all about how no matter what state we are in, the Lord is there. No matter what state our natural is in, it is somehow connected in the Word and to the Lord. Next slide, please. So, the Word, anyways, I guess you saw a picture of a person with words in it, and that's just a description of how we really are integrated in the Word. Oh, I see, I skipped one by accident. So, the book of life is described in two ways in Swedenborg. One is the Word the Word is the book of life. But the other is every state that we go through on earth, we have a book of life. And if you put those two statements together, again, the Word is every state that we go through, which is also what Jim was referring to. So moving on to the next section, the inner meaning of you. If you want to advance that slide, please. And then I just have an image to say what we see on the outside of a person, if we follow this logic, is not at all necessarily what's going on the inside of a person. And by a person, I mean on the outside of a person, I don't mean what they look like. I mean what they are going through on earth. Just like the natural sense of the word is profoundly different than what's on the inside. It's all about love and charity, even when it's about pillaging and doing heinous things to one another. Some time ago, I became convinced that everybody is doing the best they can with what they have been given, biologically, spiritually, socially, educationally. We are all doing the best we can. If you say, well, if I was you, I would do this or that. Well, actually, no. If I was you, I would be doing exactly what you're doing because I'd be you, right? We are doing the best we can. And sometimes that looks like we murder someone and we're in jail, or any other number of heinous deeds. And sometimes it looks like a beautiful smile to someone who needs it, or a mother cradling a baby. It can be anything. And that's the natural sense of the word, of our lives. And that is cradled and attached to a deeper sense, which the Lord is seeing, which is it's all good. It's all a progress of our lives. I think that's beautiful. And it's almost like we're gazing at the constellations, the stars in the Word, figuring out which stars are part of us. Or it's like maybe Jim is a hey in the letter of, some Hebrew word in the Bible, and Martha is a yod, And we all are together forming God's word as it unfolds, not in a written form, but in the form of our lives, of the human race going forward. And what I like about this is then when I see somebody going through something terrible, whether it's to them or it's by them, I can say, this is also cradled by the Lord. There is a spiritual sense to this person. Let me try to find that spiritual sense. Why are they doing this? Why is this person so angry all the time? Why do they murder their neighbor verbally? It gives me the power to try to find that deeper sense of the person. And this is just okay. So the goal, obviously, then is to bring that inner sense, which is always love and charity, down into the natural, which is that last state where the heavenly city comes down onto the earth, and there's a oneness of all people there. And then the next slide, this phrase just came to me last night, so I thought I'd stick it in here. That I think of the natural life, this I hadn't until last night, but it's sort of like the plumage on a bird, right? And I've run into some people in the Swedenborgian Church and elsewhere who think that, well, the natural life is not where it's at. We should shed it and really just be in the spiritual world all the time with our mind and really sort of push away the natural. So it's true that the feathers of a bird are pretty lifeless compared to the bird, but the bird cannot fly without the plumage. It has to be there. It's important, just like the natural sense of the word is important. And it's also beautiful. We love birds in part because they're so beautiful. So God is expressing God's own self as each person here. It's not some abstract thing. Here we are in the presence of God. And that means the personality of each person here is important. It's really valuable. We don't want to look past personality. We want to see God in personality. That's the beauty of God. He gets into the natural through us, by us, as us. Next slide. So here's another sort of piece of evidence that the natural sense of the word is our lives, as is the spiritual. So we read this in, I think it's Apocalypse Revealed. It says, it definitely is. It had a great and high wall. This is the holy city, New Jerusalem. And that symbolizes the literal sense of the word. And then it goes on to say, the literal sense of the word protects the spiritual meaning that lies within, as a wall protects a city and its inhabitants. So this is a little bit of a confusing statement, isn't it? Because if you don't like the word and you ridicule it, well, you're pretty much ridiculing all the good stuff there about love and charity and obeying God, all those good things. So how is it really, and that's the internal sense, made bare in the natural. So how is it really protecting it? And on a similar level, if I, insult someone or am mean to someone on the natural level, isn't that doing harm on the spiritual level in a way? And same thing with the natural world. If I just see the natural surface of nature and not the spiritual depth of it, and I say, well, then it doesn't matter, and I slaughter it to get some money, I'm still slaughtering it. So how is that protecting it? Right? How is it protecting it? Well, what is it really protecting? It's protecting the person who's doing the harm. Because if I knew that nature was full of God and I still did that, I would be really doing something bad to myself. Same thing if I do harm to another. If I really knew God's presence in that person, if I could really see that and I still did that, then I'm doing much more harm. Same thing with the word. So what is it protecting? It's protecting the inner sense, which is the person. The person is the inner sense, their soul, their spirit. So onto the helicopter. How do we use this for good? Well, the whole word, as I said, has a description of every kind of state we can go through. So what we can do is we can say, okay, I'm really angry. I'm really angry right now. Who is angry in the Bible? Okay, Jonah got pretty angry, and Cain got pretty angry. So we zero, that's the smoke rising up, and we take the helicopter over to where the smoke is, and then we land it. And we say, okay, what does this story have to say? And we put ourselves into the shoes of Cain or of Jonah. And we read it with as much attention as we can give it to find out what is the solution to this anger. How is the Lord using this? What is the spiritual sense of this that I can rise up into and escape the natural sense that I'm stuck in? And it can be with anything. And I've had some really amazing messages come this way. So it's a rescue book. You find your state in the natural sense, and you can start to access the spiritual sense, which can pull you up out of it. And even when we don't really see what's happening, next slide, please, it's still untangling our lives, I believe, by raking our mind through the word with intention and openness. Even if we don't get that clear message, I do believe it slowly is untangling the natural sense of our lives. And sometimes, next slide, please, it's clear, showing us the next steps in our journey. And sometimes it doesn't look very fun, looks pretty bleak, and sometimes it's a lot more inviting. Next slide, please. It's a beautiful portal to a place that we want to go. But either way, it's going to be helping us. Next slide, please. I wonder if anybody here has had the experience of you're reading the word and suddenly you realize it's authoring you. It's authoring your states as you're reading it. It's a very strange experience to realize this knows me and it's telling me who I am. And that's evidence that we are the spiritual sense of the word. The human beings are the spiritual sense of the word. And if you think about it, it's heaven, right? The spiritual sense of the word is heaven, we read. Well, our spirit is a part of heaven. So when I read about how important the spiritual sense of the word is, I'm reading more and more how important our neighbors are, how important and how unique and precious each person is. Each yod and tittle in the Hebrew is precious. And we all have our place in the word, our places. Some stories resonate with us more than others. And that's our home. In God's home are many mansions. And no matter how terrible a life may look, he will draw all people. If I am raised up, I will draw all people. And he did it, you know. He sanctified all of that terrible history by saving the human race and rising. And he takes us with us, passengers in this amazing process. So in case you haven't had that experience of the word is reading you and knowing you and authoring you, I'll just give two little examples. I remember reading through the story, I think it was in Arcana, about Isaac and the promise of Isaac, and Sarai and Abram laugh. And whatever it was saying at that point, I remember in my mind saying, this can't be true. This is too far out there. And I was sort of chuckling inside, and then the next thing is, and Sarai laughed, and then it described what that meant, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's talking exactly about what I just am going through. Another one from the natural sense of the word, I was in college. I had said, I'm not going to believe anything I've been taught. I want to start with a blank slate, find out for myself if God is real. If God is real, I'm going to be able to search for God, and he will honor that search and reveal himself. So I'm not going to go through the whole process, but found out God is real in a way totally unexpected. And then I was like, okay, next step, is Jesus real? And I had a tremendous skepticism that a person on earth could be God. It just didn't make any sense. But there was a Christian Bible study on campus, and I thought, all right, I'll go check it out. That's a good way to find out. And I was dragging my feet. I missed the first 2 weeks, spaced it out, and showed up third week, and they were going through the Gospel of John, and it was the time of Nathaniel. That's the story they had gotten up to. That's the story I walked into. And there's this guy who's like, wow, what good can come from Nazareth? And I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. And then he says, here's a guy with no guile. Well, I have guile, but people sort of, I tried to be honest, and people have said to me, you're a pretty honest guy. So it resonated with what people had said to me. They just didn't know me well enough. But so I was like, that is a little strange. And then I thought, maybe this book is knowing me, that maybe this is something. Maybe there is something to it. And then that's what Jesus says, that's what Nathaniel says. Well, wait a minute, how do you know me? That's what I was feeling. How do you know me? And then that's what Nathaniel said. So there I am again. And then he says, I knew you when you were under the fig tree. Well, I knew a little bit of correspondences. Because I cared about these things, and I knew that figs represented natural good, and that's what I was very passionate about from very early on. We have to change the world. It's not just good to think. It's not just good to care. We have to do it. So I was like, nah, this is crazy. Now I guess, this is something else. This is the word of God. And the next thing Nathaniel says is, you are the Son of God. And then Jesus says, you're going to see heaven open up. You'll see how the earth is connected to heaven and back and forth. And a lifelong journey is you start to, see how the word heaven is united to this world, the plumage to the bird. So, but what's really exciting, even beyond the tools that come out of this, of seeing others, looking for that inner sense of others, and knowing that there's an inner sense of us even when we're in the depths of despair, and finding, learning how to do the rescue missions using the words natural sense is us. It is our book, like George Dole, a book about us. I mean, that's exciting. This is our story. It's not just my story and your story independently. It's our story. We are an evolving race. We are just as the universe and biology has evolved, the human, social, spiritual culture is evolving, and it's fun to be in for the ride. Thank you.
We're now open for questions and comments. Just raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic. And if you could state your name.
My name is Alice Flanders, and I simply thought of one thing. Every time you said about the helicopter, I read it as helicopter parenting.
Okay. Thank you, Alice.
And I hadn't realized that the story is all about us. I've been saying that a long time now, for several years, to people who are nothing to do with this church, but who get it. They said, yeah, it's about us. They have survived car accidents, and several of them have died more than once. And they know that this story is all about us, and that we are going on further.
Yeah, thank you.
I was thinking when you're talking about it speaking directly to you sometimes, when I was not in a very good state of mind, and I opened the Word and I came upon this thing about, if you won't come just because I call you, I'll put a ring in your nose and drag you. Oh, it's talking to me.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kent, for, it's always wonderful to hear your style, and I like your whole way of coming at things. You've got a deep insight. My question is a little around practical ministry at this point in dealing with this part of Swedenborgian spirituality. You're in congregational leadership, and the younger, I hear from the younger generation people, and sociological studies bear this out, that the Bible has receded dramatically from the life stories of the upbringing of the generations underneath the boomers. And so the minister where I go to church, the Swedenborgian Church in the East Bay, my minister is about 30 or 31 years old, Tom Muller, and he feels that it's a challenge to use the Bible as a starting point in engaging the younger generations. I'm wondering if I know you've written a couple of books around spiritual themes that are moved to experience and even psychology. Can you address any kind of way to deal with perhaps the problem that we're being presented for some of us in ministry with a dramatic move away from the Bible as a sense of an important book to engage in terms of like even starting a conversation?
Yeah, thank you. It's certainly perceived as an antiquated book from my speaking with young people, many young people, but I would say among them, spirituality isn't even interesting. It's, there's so much here that it's very preoccupying. It's very easy to spend a whole day here or in a video game, and why do I need spirituality? I just think it's the end of a cycle, and it needs to be swept away, and that's this is just how I am viewing it. And the old spirituality needs to be swept away, and there's going to be a time of, spiritual darkness, so that, maybe the new heaven can come down, and the previous structures of thought are blocking that, and so there needs to be a blank slate. But I have not found a way. I have not found a way to reach young adults.
Is that true for the New Testament also? I find, I'm not with young adults much anymore, but that the New Testament was much more meaningful to the young people when I had young people in my house than the Old Testament.
Well, I would say it's just hard to get people in the door. I tried to do youth retreats and young adult retreats, and I tried to make it, as down to earth and, about us, and how is, why is it valuable to have a spirituality, a really basic, and, 3 people signing up, and after 3 attempts, I gave up. I just don't, obviously I don't have the right answer. But what I have noticed is in casual conversation with young people, if I can, or if they're forced to play music in the church, or paid to play music, that sometimes they'll be like, oh, that was really interesting, and it's always when it's about caring for other people. Like that's the value that's surviving, that we're here to care for other people and not judge. And I would say that's a great foundation for whatever God's bringing next.
Okay, that's an important question, so I'm going to repeat the question too that Jim posed, which is biblical literacy among young people that we might want to be reaching out to is not there. Actually, it's a very complex problem. I'd like to speak to it briefly. One is that there's biblical literacy in the South, and with, biblical fundamentalism would also be a problem for Swedenborgians, and they're very literate. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I think I'm trying to present a fact where there is biblical literacy, but if it's fundamentalist, it would be very difficult to incorporate. So I think it's a problem, and even Kent hasn't really come up with an answer to that. So I'm going to head into this a little different direction from a different place. And one is to look at what that teaching is in the book of, in Swedenborg's book, Revelation, the number 900, where it says the literal sense of the word is the high wall, and it protects the inner sense. And the question is, what is it, and Ken said this, so I'll repeat it, what is it protecting? It's protecting the human mind. It's creating a form that looks like a wall within which the human mind can function and learn and be comforted, be instructed, can have an experience of interior illumination and enlightenment. The literal sense of the Bible can do that with a contemplative approach. So why do I say that? The issue can be, the problem that has been presented can be transposed to the solution, which is the development, healthy development of a human being, a human mind, and everyone is interested in that, even young people. You can engage their attention by saying, this is for you. This is so you'll be happy and successful in life. I could be cute and say, to a young man, you're going to get the girl. To a young girl, you're going to get the guy. I mean, you know what I'm saying. So we can always engage with that level. I'll end by saying there's a way to say that and then say, yes, it's in the Bible. But I'll end by saying that there is youth, there are young people, and there are older people. And older people are also attracted to the kind of community that you're forming in the Lord's New Church. Older people who are interested in the development of their own minds. So we can attend to the needs of older people as well as younger people.
Go on this side of the room. I'll be back.
Ken, I forget the name. I believe that's your mother, but she mentioned the New Testament, and I was thinking of my generation when I was young, and what really appealed to the hippies, quote, not all that way, was the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ Superstar. It had a broad appeal, and in my own life, in reading the Bible, and even in Swedenborg, I find myself, actually, just what Jesus said and did, not what even in the four Gospels was said about him, and different things were added as they went along. I believe they wrote it. But if you just focus on Jesus and his life and what he said, that could maybe appeal to young people especially, because it did in my generation. And you know, I just thought in my head, the musical Jesus Christ Superstar and how popular that was, and that was just Jesus and his life.
Yeah. Yep. That's how it appeals to me.
This is Susanna. I just wanted to add that there was a movie that we saw, my husband and I saw recently. It's called The Jesus Revolution. I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but it's about the hippies that were brought to Jesus. And it's a fascinating story that happened in the late 60s, early 70s.
I was pondering at one point in my life why we lived in a world that was so busy all the time that we didn't really have, it was difficult to make time for spirituality, and then it got even worse since then with the phones that everybody's on all the time and the technology. And the answer that came to me was that the Lord is protecting us all because we live in a terrible time, and that if our interiors were more open and available to this time, it could harm a lot of us. So that by staying on the surface, he's protecting us from what's underneath.
Thank you.
I hear the comments sort of like the spirituality that it seems like a deep darkness that sort of the young people are not so interested anymore. And but one thing that's sort of image that came to mind is the children of Israel overnight. Like you don't know how you're going to get fed, and then in the morning the manna was on the ground, and I think that the Lord is always there in the darkness. We may not be able to connect with these people, but the Lord does, and He does it in His own way, which we don't understand.
Yeah.
Feeds us individually.
Yeah, and again, I think also it's like the world's so small, and you look, well, these people are convinced this is true, these people are convinced this is true, which is one of the stages of Fowler, where you realize, okay, it's dishonest to say, I've got the one truth, and everyone should believe like I believe. So this washing away of faith, I think, is a part of that, and it's actually good. It's got some negative downsides, but again, there's these core values that are remaining, which is we need to be good to each other. We need to be good to each other, and that is the inner sense of the word, right? So I'm not sure it's so dark. Plus, I'll say this, anyone heard of Kendrick Lamar? Okay, I hadn't until pretty recently. He's a rap artist, and my son started to talk to me a lot about him. He was like, Dad, there's this I think I found my kind of music, and he was describing it. He won a Pulitzer Prize for his music describing what it was like, what it's like for urban black youth. It's like journalism in that sense. But it's also very religious. Like there's the end of one of his songs, there's a woman praying and a group of men praying after her, and the very last line is, "This is the beginning of your new life, enjoy it," or something like that. A very pro-social and even spiritual values in this music, which won tons of Grammys and which tons of youth are listening to. And you know, when I think about the 80s, compared to what my kids, the music I hear them listening to and the messages, it's actually brighter now than it was in the 80s, where it was all about, you know, plastic surface things. But, so I was like, wow, I want to get to know this Kendrick Lamar. Well, it turned out he was playing all the clean versions for me, and I listened to about 2 minutes. I was like, I cannot listen to this. And I think that's actually great, because it's taking these wonderful, true, and beautiful things about caring about each other and seeking God and being truthful and like turning away from Satan even is one of the topics. And this is reaching tons of people. And it's embedding it in what we see on the surface of the young culture, which is, oh man, it's all hell is broken loose, there's no hope. Right? No, there is this beautiful thing. And it's bringing it down to that level. And so, you know, I contemplate, should I let my son listen to it? Well, yes, I should. The last slide, I actually forgot the healer, right? And I think that this way, you know, like I said, I'm very fascinated and seeking, how do we become healers? And the more I can remember that everyone's got a spiritual sense, and that we are the Word. This is God's presence here in the natural level. But I think that way of looking at people is the foundation for our becoming a healer. You have to, you know, start by seeing people the way that we're supposed to see them, which is that they have an inner sense. And then what comes next, I'll still working on that one.
I was thinking about what you were talking a while ago about ideas and things like that. And I was thinking about this idea of, well, we're getting rid of these books. We're not going to allow the students to have these books in school. We're not going to allow these students to have these books in libraries. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there thinking a lot of what they'd like to put out related to Swedenborg would, I'm sure, be on their list of, we don't want that in the school.
Yeah. Thank you, Alice. Ned?
When I was a teenager, we were all going to hell in a handbag.
I was just thinking, you know, with the people that I serve, they talk about the world is so terrible, all the rest of it. The answer is it's always been that way.
Yeah.
This is the place where we're supposed to get it right, and it's always going to be messy.
Yeah.
So, and they were very open to that. They're very open to all kinds of things. But to me, this world is always a mess. It's always going to be a mess. But there are so many wonderful highlights of the dear things that people do. You just have to look for them.
And a lot of the bad in the past was hidden and not talked about. And that's part of it. Did you have something you had wanted to say? Evan had your hand up. And then Roz, and then I think we're going to have to break.
Hi, my name is Evan. I was thinking a lot about what you were saying about the young people not being as interested, and then it was amazing because I raised my hand, was going to mention this, and then you spoke about the rap artist, and my thought is that I think young people understand music in an intuitive way, even music without lyrics that's spiritually based. And that was my experience. Of course, I'm a musician, so I'm biased, but I still think that people who are not ready to contemplate biblical texts and their thick meaning, or even Swedenborg, which I still struggle to read because it's so thick. But music cuts right through that, and I think it's a language that's so much more intricate than the spoken word, that it's part of the word in the sense you are saying, that directly affects our sort of seeking nature of who we are and why we're here and all of those important questions.
Thank you, Evan. You'll have to play some for us.
What I wanted to share is kind of similar to what you're saying, Evan, was along the lines of young people and how is the divine reaching them and how are they sharing spirituality or whatever. My nephew Bram in high school pretty much rejected the Bible, Swedenborg, all of that. I think he would have identified as agnostic maybe or atheist, something like that. But a very good musician, and he could make money by playing the guitar for the Creekside Church. And something happened in some message that somebody gave that triggered memory or something that he wanted to share. So the next Sunday, he was the preacher, which those of us who knew Bram were like, Bram is the preacher? And he shared a very poignant and deeply spiritual account of some kind of transformation that had happened within him. And I don't remember the details, but it was, afterwards people said, well, you can tell he's Doug Taylor's grandson. But anyway, what that showed to me was he communicated with people of all ages from his own experience. Just like you're saying, he was the innocence, or he was sharing the innocence of his life. And that seems to me maybe emblematic of the way that younger people, we don't have to worry maybe so much that their attachment to this stone wall that protects the innocence. They're not attached to that. That stone wall has crumbled, and maybe they don't need it. They just, maybe we don't need it in that sense. If we're honest with how the divine is working in our lives, even if we don't know to use that terminology, we're sharing something deeply meaningful that can really help each other.
Thank you.
Want to thank Kent? Oh. Real quick.
Thank you. Is this on? Oh, yeah. Okay. As a fellow relatively, I'd say I'm a young person.
Now we're in trouble. Oh, we didn't know they were with us.
So I think it's interesting to look at what exactly you want the younger generation to learn or grow into, because I think you'd be very surprised at how spiritual, just naturally, my generation is. I find that even people younger than me, my sister's a preschool teacher, and she's teaching currently 2-year-olds, and it's wild the emotional intelligence that they have at such a young age, and just how spiritual they are and how much they inherently know, and it's very naturally within them. And I think it's very important to also think about how some things need to be dismantled, and I'm not saying that what we inherently study currently needs to be dismantled. I'm saying that there's a purity in religion, and there's a purity in spirituality, and in religion there is a spirituality, but religion needs to change, and it's supposed to continually evolve with each generation. And so it's not necessarily how can we teach the new generation and how can we get them to, come to Jesus and come to the Bible, but instead maybe look at, what is this new generation saying and how are they living their lives that is inherently spiritual, and how can we learn from that? Because, if you look at Jesus in general, bless you, Jesus came and everybody was like, who is this person? What are they teaching? It is not what we do. It is not how we are. And they were like, what is going on? And he had this new way. And so it's, I think, important to understand that in the teaching of Jesus, just like your talk was saying, is that Jesus is in us. We are Jesus, and God is us. And so we can look at Jesus and be like, he was this magnificent person who brought new teachings, and also we are magnificent people bringing new teachings. And, so we can go back and constantly think about Jesus, but it's important to understand that all the same teachings that Jesus taught others and shared with others and the love that he gave is also within us. We are the teachers. And so the new generation has that inherent knowledge, I think, that, you know, yes, here's this man that we really like to look up to, but we are also him, and we are also God. Yeah.
And we can tell Erin is Martha Richardson's granddaughter.
Erin, thank you. Thank you so much.
We are excused from lecture, but 5 minutes we'll be starting our discussion group. So please come back and join discussion group at 11. Teachers are rushing off to their teaching assignments. And Martha, you must be so proud.
Every generation looked at the younger generation.
That's from time immemorial. From time immemorial. It's absolutely true.